Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today I'm going to show you how to make a quilt called Hint of Fall. This is a pattern from Cozy Quilt Designs, and I haven't made it before, but it looks really fun because it has some simple patchwork, but then it has these really nice leaf appliques that are going to go right on top of the patchwork. Now this pattern uses fat quarters, and one of the nicest things about patterns from this company is that they've got multiple sizes included all in the same pattern. Now I want to make the twin size. It's 75 by 93 and it uses 26 fat quarters, 5/8 of a yard for the inner border, 1 1/3 for the outer, and then when we're done with the top we're going to need 5 7/8 for the back and 2/3 for the binding. Now I just got this question this morning in an email. What is a fat quarter? A fat quarter is a 1/4 yard of fabric, but it's a particular shape. And here's how you get it. You cut a 1/2 yard of fabric. So 1/2 yard, that's 18 inches. Then if you open this up and you cut it in half right along the middle here, now you have a fat quarter. So if you buy a bundle of fat quarters, they're all shaped like this. Now a fat quarter is exactly the same amount of fabric as a 1/4 yard. But if you cut a 1/4 yard off the bolt, it's very long and skinny. And it's not as useful for all quilt patterns as this bigger, squarer pieces. And that's why the fat quarters have become so popular. So one thing to keep in mind is anytime you're doing a fat quarter project, you can always use 1/2 yards. And that's what I'm going to do here. I've got this really nice group of fall colored prints that will look really good in the pattern. And I've got 13 1/2 yards and I'm going to split them. And that's going to give me my 26 fat quarters. Now, if you're going to change and use 1/2 yards instead of fat quarters, you want to remember that each 1/2 yard will give you 2 fat quarters. So you want to make sure that you've still got a nice variety of prints. There's 10 different prints in the quilt on the cover here, and I've got 13 different prints. So this is nice and varied. It will still look really good in this pattern. So the first step is to pick out 6 fat quarters that are going to be used for the leaf appliques. And I'm going to pick out the darkest ones because I think those will make the best leaves. Those will be our leaves. And then we're going to take all the other fat quarters and we're going to iron them nice and flat before we cut so that all our cuts will be nice and accurate. So all of our leaf fabrics, we're going to set those aside because we're going to work on those later. But the rest of the fat quarters all get cut exactly the same size. So take as many as you're comfortable cutting. I'm going to do 4 layers at a time. You may want to cut a few more, a few less. And I can't give you all of the sizes because it's not my pattern, but I've made a lot of Cozy Quilt Designs patterns and they're very easy to follow. Once your cutting is done, go ahead and take all the pieces right to the sewing machine. Now I'm going to grab 3 strips, 3 different colors, it doesn't matter which ones, and we're going to sew them side by side. So we're going to take our first 2, and I'm going to line up the edges, and I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam, and I'm going to make sure I don't stretch either one of the strips, and sew all the way down here. And then I'm going to finger press the seam to one side. So let's press it this way. For some reason, that's the easiest way for me to press. So I'm going to open it with my hands here and then pull either the pad or my fingernail right down the seam. Now we're going to add the 3rd piece. Same procedure, just go all the way down. And we're going to press a seam same direction. So I'm going to go ahead take the rest of my pieces here and sew them all into these 3 strip units. Once you've got those done, the next thing is to iron these up. So I like to smooth it out. It's pretty flat because we finger pressed it. And if you're not sure if you've got it straight, you can get your ruler and put it along one of those seams. So if you've got it stitched and it's curving up a little bit, maybe you stretched it when you were sewing, it's not going to look straight. So you can ease it back into shape there so that that seam is nice and straight along your yardstick, and then iron it, because that'll make your patchwork later on be more accurate. Now we are going to subcut this. So I'm just going to trim a little bit off the edge here and then make some subcuts. Now you can cut them all one at a time, or you can save a lot of time by doing them in bulk. So I'm going to lay my first piece down along a line. Then I'm going to get the next strip unit and I'm going to move it up about an inch. So I can see that I'm about an inch up here. And I'm not all the way off there, but I can see I'm about an inch up there. And I'm staggering them so that the seam allowances don't end up in the same spots. So it's kind of lumpy where the seam allowances are here, but I'm not getting a whole bunch of them in the same spot. So this way, if you like to cut 4 or 5 layers of fabric, you can cut all these at the same time. It's really only 4 or 5 layers of fabric, but you're going to get a whole bunch all at once. Take all of these little segments back to the machine and just grab 2 different ones. Take that one and that one, and we are going to sew them together. Now the only thing we want to make sure is that our seam allowances are going in opposite directions. So those are going down. These are also going down, but all we have to do is flip it around. Now, when we sew these together, they're going to be going in opposite directions. They're going to nest, and it's going to make it really easy to match this up and do that seam. Open this up. Finger press to one side, and go ahead and do that with all the rest of these segments. The blocks are all done and we're ready to lay them out. Now the layout is extremely easy. They just get laid 2 different ways. So this one, they're facing that way. The next one, we're just going to turn it 90 degrees. We're going to keep alternating the direction and lay out the whole quilt. Now mine is going to be 7 blocks wide and 9 blocks tall, and anywhere I get 2 of the same print matching up, I'm just going to turn it around, and if that one's matching still there, I'll turn it around again, and I may trade around a little bit and get a nice pleasing layout. The quilt blocks are all laid out, and before I stitch them into rows and stitch the rows together, we're going to work on the appliques, because it's going to be a lot easier to work with appliques on a small section of the quilt rather than trying to put them onto the whole entire top when it's finished. The pattern comes with templates for 2 nice leaves here, and it doesn't give you specific methods for putting the appliques on. It just says use your favorite method. My favorite method is to fuse them on before I sew them, and I'm going to use a product called Heat and Bond Light. So what this is a paper-backed fusible product. So it's got a smooth paper side and a kind of bumpy side that has the fusible part. It's got a little glue stuff that will adhere when we use an iron. So I'm going to trace on the paper side one of the leaves, and I'm just going to do it with a pencil. And even if I don't do it perfectly, I can straighten it out as I am cutting. Now, I'm not going to cut the outline. I'm just going to cut a bigger piece of this off. So now we're going to take one of the fat quarters that we set aside just for the appliques, And we'll take our leaf here, and always before I put any fusible on, I'm going to steam press my fabric. Now this is the back side, this is the reverse side of the batik here. And I've got it nice and flat. And now I'm putting the bumpy side of this down, the paper side is up. And with this Heat and Bond light, you don't need to use steam. You just need to press it on, medium heat, for about 2 seconds. There we go. Now it's nicely stuck on here. It's stuck all the way down, and this fusible dries completely clear, and I can still see my pencil lines. So all I'm going to do now is use a sharp pair of scissors and cut all the way around the drawn line. So it's pretty easy to cut because the paper is on the fabric. It's pretty easy just to keep swiveling the paper around. You can get nice smooth cuts. There, now that it's all done, all we have to do is get the paper off. So I like to get kind of a corner, loosen it up a little bit. Now the paper peels right off, and what we've got is we've got adhesive on this side. So this leaf here, it's going to fit on one of these patchwork blocks. Here's the block. So I'm going to be able to do all of the leaf appliques and then stitch the whole quilt together just like we would normally make a quilt top. Here's how this works. It's very cool. So that shiny side, that side with the adhesive, that goes down on top of our block. Then we put the iron on it, and it takes about 6 seconds. So I'm going to have to move it a couple times. No steam, just a dry iron. And now that is completely stuck on there, and we can stitch around the edges and it won't move, and it'll be really easy to applique. I've got my little Singer machine out here. This has a zigzag. It has a lot of different stitches on it, but it has a zigzag, which is what I use for the appliquing. So every machine is a little bit different, but I can choose all these different stitches, and then I can choose how wide they're going to be and then how big they're going to be. So you want a lot of stitches or a few stitches, you can make those adjustments. And again, every machine is a little bit different with how you're going to make the adjustments. We want to stitch this where we have a lot of thread covering the leaf and not much on the background. So if this was our leaf, we want the thread to be going like this, just on the outside of the leaf fabric. And when you come to a corner, you can pivot and keep appliquing. It takes a little bit of practice, so I always do a practice piece first, but that's the basic concept for when you're doing zigzag machine applique. Now I like to use a stabilizer underneath my applique, and I'm just using computer paper because I have a lot of computer paper. You can use newsprint. There's other products specifically made for this use, but really any sort of paper will work. And that's to keep our stitches nice and even and to keep our applique nice and flat while we're stitching with it. I'm going to use a brown thread on the brown leaves. I don't want the thread to show much because we've got all this intricate pointy stuff, and I'm afraid if I use a contrast thread, it's going to take away from the shape of the leaves. So I'm just going to start here. And again, I'm trying to cover a lot of the leaf and not much of the background. When you come to any sort of curve, you sometimes have to take a few stitches and pivot a little till you can get around that corner. The idea is to try to have your stitches perpendicular to the cut edge of your leaf. So here's a point here. I'm going to lift the presser foot, pivot, and then keep going. So I'm going to pivot every time I come to a corner. And sometimes you have to stop in the middle here because you just can't get around that curve fast enough. Spin it a little, keep going. And it goes pretty fast once you get the hang of it. Now I always recommend doing a practice piece before you start, because you may decide that you want to have a darker color thread, or you want to have your stitch a little bit wider. Those are all personal preference options so that you can do it however you like. Coming to where I started here, and I'm just going to drive right over that a little bit so my stitches are anchored. Trim it off. Now, the paper on the back, because my stitches are pretty small, it rips off pretty easily. So I'm just going to go all around the edges, take it off the outside, and then we'll take it out of the middle too. There, so now you can see all the stitching. Because my stitch is a little bit loose, we're not losing these nice points around the edges. Now, before you applique all the leaves, it's a good idea to lay them out all over your quilt like I've got here. I just put them kind of at random, and I mixed up the colors a little bit, and I used kind of a diagonal path so the leaves are just scattered down from the tree. You might decide you want more leaves or less leaves, or you want them more at the bottom. All of those could be really interesting looks for your whole quilt. So I've got each leaf on one block. If you decide you want to put your leaf in the middle of two blocks, that's okay. Just sew these two together, then put the leaf on, and that way you'll still have a small thing that you can take over to your applique machine. And then you can still put the whole quilt together in rows, which is what I'm going to do next. Then I'm going to get the borders on, and we'll get this onto the quilting machine. I've got the quilt all done, and it's on the machine. And I love how the leaves are sprinkled across there, but we need to pick a thread color now. Normally, I will pick a color that will blend in with the background, which in this case would probably be this green. It's going to blend everywhere, except it's going to show a teeny bit on the cream. But I'm concerned that the green will show on the leaves. Might not show on that one too much, but we've got some darker leaves. So I'm thinking I might like this rust color. It doesn't show much in the patchwork. It's going to show just a little bit in this light one. So let's try this one out. Now I want to quilt it with a leaf pattern, and this one will be just perfect because these maple leaves, they're shaped very similar to the appliques that are in the quilt. And I also like all these little curlicues between the leaves. Now that the quilt is all done, you can really feel the hint of fall. Those leaves just look like they're scattering down. It's really an awesome pattern. I love that the batiks in the background, they're very muted so that the leaves will stand out a little bit, not too much. Now the quilting pattern, I don't know if you can see the leaf here, but it's almost exactly the same size as the applique leaves. And I used a darker thread on the back. Now you can really see them here. I like that effect a lot with the dark thread on this almost solid batik background because you can really see that quilting pattern. Now it says twin size, but it's really large. It's 75 by 93, so that's quite a bit bigger than a standard twin would be. Easy to make the patchwork, fun to do the leaves, just a very satisfying quilt. Thanks so much for watching our tutorial today. We hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you have any questions about how to make this quilt, just leave them in the comments below and I'll be sure to answer them. Now we've got one more thing. At the end of every video, we do a giveaway. Today, we're going to give away a quilt called Line Dance. Now this is a big quilt. We did a video, we actually did 2 videos on how to make the line dance. This is the version 2. It's all made with batiks. Fun quilt to make, but today you can win it. So click the link below that says giveaway, and then you can enter your name and your email address. And remember, the contest is open to everybody worldwide, so good luck. Now, if you like our videos and you want to support us, the best thing you can do is subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would really help us out. Happy quilting!